the presentation of free or not to be, so is the question. And as we explained a little bit earlier, we're waiting for some of our students to come in, but we're going to go ahead and get started and allow them to come in during our presentation. First of all, I want to ask a question, and let's make this very quick because I know that you all can give me a very quick but very insightful answer. What does free mean? Okay, I understand one person says it means a question mark. What about anyone else? What does free mean? Being in your own control. Anyone else have an interpretation of what free means? Liberty? Anyone else? No boundaries?
Well, I said balance, but you could say
no boundaries. Okay, anyone else? Doesn't cost you anything. Anyone else?
It does cost.
Being able to exercise your rights without someone infringing upon them. Anything else? I'm sorry? The right to make your decisions. Well, I would say free means all of that.
I want to add one other thing, because I think with freedom comes responsibility.
Yes.
Because if we're not careful, we can lose a lot of the freedom that we just take for granted.
Very much so. And so our title today, free or not to be. So is the question. And so the question is that Mrs. Brown has brought up. What happens when we choose not to exercise our responsibilities? Then our freedom is questioned and compromised. As I said, welcome this afternoon to this presentation. This is, oh my goodness, the 15th year that we have done this presentation through the gracious hosting of Congresswoman Corrine Brown. And we're very happy to have all of you here today. My name is Addie Richburg, and I'm president of the National Alliance of Faith and Justice. And it's been my pleasure to be the moderator of this event for each of those 15 years. We today have two segments. One segment of our program is informational, and the other segment of our program is inspirational. And in our informational part, you will hear a lot about the current work of the Underground Railroad, how the Underground Railroad is being preserved and being interpreted across the country. And you will hear a lot about how some of the things that we are looking forward to are going to happen here within the next year and the next 2 or 3 years. And so today I am very pleased, just to kind of digress out of order here a little bit, I'm very pleased to bring to the podium or introduce one of our speakers. The speaker that we are definitely getting ready to hear from is Ms. Diane Miller. Ms. Miller is served as the National Program Manager for the National Park Service National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom since 1999. And in 2015, the program was moved to Cambridge, Maryland. Now, can someone tell me what's so important about Cambridge, Maryland? Everybody except Lewis can tell me. What's so important about Cambridge, Maryland? Someone said protest. What else? Someone said voting. What else? Harriet Tubman. All right, I won't spoil Diane's message, so let me call forth Diane Miller.
Thank you, Addie, and thank you, Congresswoman Brown. And thank you all for being here. I know we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. But I've been working in the National Park Service with a program called the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom, which was created in 1998, law passed by Congress and signed by Bill Clinton. And the program is tasked to do 3 main things, which are to educate the public about the Underground Railroad, to provide technical assistance to people who are trying to preserve and tell the story, and to create a network of historic sites and interpretive programs and research facilities that have a strong connection to this history. So we have a network of 583 members, and we are trying to tell the full range of the Underground Railroad story, which we conceive of as the resistance to enslavement through escape and flight. So we are focusing the center of that story on those people who were enslaved, who took that brave step to leave that place of enslavement. We're not focusing it on people that might, although we include the story, we don't focus it around people that might have helped shelter freedom seekers or provide them with assistance in some way. That's definitely part of the story, but the central part of the story are those enslaved people who took their self-determination, as we heard about the subject of freedom. So we look at a lot of different ways that there might be sites that relate to this story. They can be associated with prominent people. Some Maryland natives there that might be recognizable, Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. We do look at places that were stations or safe houses where somebody might have gotten shelter. We look at places associated with legal challenges. Many people were able to get their freedom by participating in the military. We just having celebrated the anniversary of the Civil War, we know about a lot of black soldiers. So military sites associated with people who escaped from slavery and participated in the military. We look at monuments that commemorate these people. We're looking at the whole life of a freedom seeker, not just that moment when they might have been hiding along in their journey. So we're looking at where did they go. And we like to think of our country as sort of the beacon of freedom, but for enslaved African Americans, a lot of times they had to go out of our country. So we include places in Canada and Mexico and the Caribbean because the story sometimes ends in other places. Churches were a really important part of the Underground Railroad. We know that churches were very important in the African American community and sometimes the center of community building and support. And so churches are one place that are very often associated with the Underground Railroad. Cemeteries are often included because many times a lot of the places associated with this activity and people who were involved with the activity have been gone or destroyed. And so sometimes recognizing a person who was involved at their gravesite is important. And so we look at the routes that people followed, we look at where they escaped from, we look at where there might have been rescues or kidnappings. So we really try to take a broad look at the Underground Railroad. It's really a migration story, a journey. It's not just about hiding in a cellar or an attic someplace. So we're trying to tell a broader, large story. So unfortunately you probably can't see this very well, but this is a map that shows where the members of the Network to Freedom are located around the country. And you can see there's a lot in the east, and that's what we very commonly think about, New England and Boston and Philadelphia with the Underground Railroad. But the Underground Railroad went a lot of different places, anywhere that people could go to be free. So if you were enslaved in Texas, where do you think you might go to find freedom? Mexico, exactly right. So if you were involved with whaling or on a ship, where do you think you might go to find freedom? Canada, where else? I think it's great. Our young people are over there. They might be able to see what's written down in the bottom left of that map. Hawaii. Yep. We have a really well-documented story of a man who was enslaved in New York, and he got on a ship, and he was on ships for a long time, but he ended up in Hawaii, and he decided he was going to stay. And I think we can probably all relate to that. So I just wanted to kind of show that to say that there are Underground Railroad stories all over the country. It's out in California, it's in Kansas, and Iowa, Nebraska. It's not just an Eastern sort of story. And so what it really speaks to is that innate drive in people everywhere to be free. So here's my resistance to enslavement. So we've been working at this for about almost 20 years, and we've learned a lot about the Underground Railroad. It's not the story of rich white Quakers helping, enslaved people who did not have resources or the knowledge or abilities to help themselves. It's really a story about African American agency. It's a story about freedom, and it changed over place and time, but it was really, whenever people were enslaved, they had a desire to be free, and so we look at a very broad timetable. So we have this network, and we have 583 places listed in this network, and one of our goals is to get people like everyone in this room to go visit these sites, because one of the best ways that you can really understand and appreciate this history is to walk where it happened. And so one of the things that we're doing is participating in a program that the National Park Service has that encourages people to visit parks. So they have this passport program where you can get a little book. It's like looks like a U.S. passport, and when you go to a park, you can get a stamp in it. And then kind of, some people like to go and collect stamps at all the different parks that they visit. So we are following that idea for these sites in the Network to Freedom and programs and facilities. So we have a passport stamp for those. And so to mark the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, we created just a little brochure kind of thing with a special map in it of different sites of the Network to Freedom where you can get your passport stamped. And so this is what you see on the screen there, and I think there were some out on the table. Ms. Richburg has a program that she does called Pen or Pencil, working with young people to encourage reading and literacy, and that is a program in the network, and they do have a passport stamp. So you can get your passport stamp here. So I encourage everybody to pick up one of those brochures, to look at the list of sites that you can go and visit. They are almost anywhere in the country that you are, and go visit some Underground Railroad sites and learn about this history. And so that's the map, but you can, oh, went too far. This is a map of the Underground Railroad in Maryland and Delaware and the Harriet Tubman Byway. So the state of Maryland has been very actively engaged in documenting their stories and developing ways that visitors can go and learn about those stories. So you can take a route for 128 miles through Maryland and all the way up through Delaware, and you can visit these Underground Railroad sites. So we encourage you to do that and to participate in as many Underground Railroad programs and sites as you can. So I'm going to stop with that. And are you gonna be...
We thank Ms. Miller for her presentation, and hopefully there's been something about the Underground Railroad stated that you didn't know. And one real quick thing before we bring up our next speaker, I want to ask one question. What is the one state, and I only have one, what is the one state where someone escaped to that you would not likely believe that would have been an Underground Railroad escape state? She said New York. There was another state she mentioned. Who said Hawaii? Hawaii. All right, our next speaker is also from the National Park Service, and he serves as the superintendent for the new site that will commemorate Harriet Tubman. His name is Mr. Robert T. Parker. In August of 2014, the Northeast Regional Director, Mike Caldwell, announced the selection of Mr. Parker to the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historic Park and Underground Railroad Network, the Freedom Program. He recently moved here from Wilberforce, Ohio, so I know we have some Ohio people in the audience. Prior to his assignment here, he was with the Charles Young Buffalo Soldier National Monument, and he's a very distinguished history. He's from Kinston, North Carolina originally, and I want to say also welcome because I lived in Goldsboro. All right, we welcome to the podium, Mr. Parker.
Good afternoon. As was mentioned, I am the superintendent for the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park, as well as the Network to Freedom program. And what I'm going to present to you is a slide presentation that I usually do with my partners, the Maryland State Park Service, who is a collaboration in terms of preserving the history and legacy of Harriet Tubman. But I wanted to give you an overview of the work that we're doing right now in preparation for our grand opening in 2017. So I'm going to speed through a couple of slides based on the time that I have this afternoon. As you may or may not know, the National Park Service, we are the stewards of most of America's national heritage with regards to historical sites, cultural resources, and natural resources. The Statue of Liberty is one of our sites, the Grand Canyon, the National Mall. And recently, Charles Young was also added the same day as Harriet Tubman, which was March 25th, 2013, under a proclamation, presidential proclamation. Fort Monroe, Pullman, as well as Stonewall. And so these new places that President Barack Obama has included in the National Park Service, it really reflects the diversity and prepares individuals to understand that inclusion is important in this country in terms of the stories that should be told. And so President Obama did an awesome job in his last 8 years. I think it's been about 26 new national monuments that he, along through presidential proclamation, has added to our 412 units. So let's applaud President Obama for that work. As mentioned, the historical monument was established in March of 2013. I'm the only park, I think, that has a presidential proclamation and legislation. And what the legislation does is further defines the monument. The monument is a corridor, if you will, of landscapes, waterways, streams, marshes, that really reflects Harriet Tubman's home, birth home. As was mentioned, Cambridge is where Harriet Tubman was born. Cambridge is the place where she escaped from. Cambridge is the place that she went back to 12 times to help emancipate almost 70 individuals, mostly who were her family and trusted loved ones. So that story really is what brought Harriet Tubman to national prominence. And so it is with this historical landscape that the presidential proclamation was established in 2013. However, in 2014, legislation further defined this proclamation by adding a National Historical Park. So with this map that you see, what you will find is that there is a National Historical Monument that spans about 25,500 acres, of which 480 acres is the National Historical Park. And so you have a National Historical Park within the context of a National Historical Monument. So there are questions right now that are burning for folks. Is it a national monument? Is it a National Historical Park? And my response to you is both and. And so we cannot do this without partnerships. Partnerships are very, very important with preserving the legacy and the life of Harriet Tubman. Maryland has done yeoman's work in terms of preserving places associated to her life and to the Underground Railroad. As was mentioned, and it might not have been mentioned, but within the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program, of the 538 members that we have, 77 of those members come from Maryland. So Maryland is leading in terms of the state with the most members to the network. And so as a part of this network, you have places like the Bucktown Store, which tells a pivotal story about Harriet Tubman. and really shapes her work with the Underground Railroad. You have the Harriet Tubman organization, which also tells the work of Harriet Tubman in downtown Cambridge, as well as the Harriet Tubman Byway, which spans throughout Maryland as well as to Delaware. And so it's these partnerships that help us do our job. The biggest partner in this is the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Maryland Park Service. We, through our legislation, it was mandated that the National Park Service would co-manage and operate a visitor center to commemorate Harriet Tubman's life. And so this co-management is with Maryland Park Service. And as you see on the slide, I have a few photographs of what the visitor center is looking like. The construction we just completed construction of the visitor center roughly March of this year. But what we're working on now is the fabrication and the installation of those exhibits. The National Park Service, we're working on a few documents. When a park is established, the misnomer is that it is a turnkey park and that you're ready for operations. And in many cases, that's not the case. That it takes a lot of work getting to the point where some older parks are at right now. There are several studies that have to go before we actually move forward with establishing certain management regulations. Special resource study was authorized by Congress in 2000 and was completed in 2008, and that answers the why question. Why was it significantly important to establish a national park in Cambridge, Maryland, as well as New York? We have two parks that commemorates Harriet Tubman's life. We had the New York Park in New York, as well as the one in Maryland. Of course, I have more partial, I'm partial to Maryland, of course. I have 2 minutes, so I'm going to go real quick to where we are with the visitor center. There's a picture of the early construction. We have these beautiful timbers that were brought in, which represents the timber industry where Harriet Tubman's father was a trusted timber foreman in Cambridge, Maryland. These timbers will be exposed in this visitor center. You see the top of the visitor center here as it shows you what the visitor experience will be. Again, that's the external picture of the visitor center as it is on Route 335 in Church Creek, Maryland. Again, a suburb, if you will, of Cambridge, Maryland. More photographs here. We have vegetated roofs. We are a silver LEED certified project with vegetated roofs and solar panels. We have a 26 square foot open air pavilion with the stone fireplace. And that particular facility is available for rent. Again, you see a version of the exhibit space here. We have 3 volumes. The first volume represents, the modern amenities, the gift shop, the orientation room, those type of activities, the library, the multipurpose room, the restrooms. The other spaces represent this historical moment in time, because you're going to go back in time. We're going to take you back to the 19th century. Again, you see an open aerial view of the exhibits themselves. I would have a virtual tour, but I don't have time. Welcome to our grand opening in 2017, March 10th. I need you in Cambridge, Maryland. Thank you.
As you can see, we're looking forward to an exciting opening of the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Park, and I hope all of you will be joining everyone out there on March 10th in Cambridge. We want to welcome to the podium our next speaker now. I think everybody became very excited when we heard that there was going to be a Harriet Tubman unit of currency.
Yes.
Harriet Tubman will be, and I won't spoil the speaker's statement, but Harriet Tubman will be one of the first females to be put on a piece of currency, and for that to be Harriet Tubman speaks volumes.
Excuse me, did you say first? First, yes, female. But tell the students over there, I'm watching you, and we're going to give you a test at the end.
Mr. Leonard Iliar became the director of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing in May of 2015 after serving as the Bureau of Engraving and Printers Deputy Director from 2012 to 2014. He's led an exciting and extensive career with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and just in case you all were wondering, this is the people who in fact print the currency. If anyone's had an opportunity to go over the U.S. Treasury and see that, that is absolutely an amazing sight. Mr. Eliar graduated magna cum laude from the University of Colorado in 1987, and he's received a gold medal award for the highest score in Virginia on the Certified Public Accounting exam, and certainly that is very important for our students. We welcome to our podium Mr. Leonard R. Eliar.
So what is a Tubman? What note did she get?
20.
The $20 bill.
Woo!
That's right. So thank you for those kind words, Addie, and thank you all for having me here today. I'd like to talk briefly about the plans for redesigning the United States currency, and in particular, the thought process that went into the selection of Harriet Tubman. The National Park Service has a huge facility to represent what Harriet Tubman means to the United States of America and what she's contributed to our democracy. We've got a note that has about 8 square inches on it to try to represent that same piece. So we've got a big challenge in front of us because she did so much for this country. In making that selection, I know there were a lot of meetings and discussions that I was not a part of. So all I can tell you is my part of the discussion and the selection process. So how did this all get started? In 2009, Treasurer Rios, who was appointed by President Obama, came into the position with one high priority, and that was to get a woman featured on United States currency. For 5 years, she worked behind the scenes and assembled, no joke, a notebook of 100 women that made significant contributions to our country and could be featured on currency. Initially, we were just talking about redesigning one note, the $10 bill. That is the note that was recommended by the Advanced Counterfeit Deterrent Committee because of the counterfeiting threats that it faced. Then, in 2014, President Obama received a letter from a little girl in Massachusetts, Sophia. And in that letter, she suggested that a woman should be featured on the United States currency. As a result of a class assignment, people were asked to look for somebody that they thought they would write a little history article about. And she looked at United States currency and noticed that there were no women on the currency. So President echoed her letter, and at the end of it he said he thought that was a pretty good idea. Well, of course, when the president says something's a pretty good idea, we got our butts moving. This led to a lot of discussions and meetings with Secretary Lew, still just talking about the $10 note. Then came the Women on a 20 campaign. And that started a large public dialogue, and it ended up in a vote for what women people thought across this country should be represented on the $20 note. And in that campaign, Harriet Tubman won, as you well know. Later that year, Secretary Lew announced plans for Treasury to embark on the redesign of the $10 note. He indicated that this next generation of notes would include design features to represent our democracy, and for the first time in almost 120 years, a woman would be featured on United States currency. Prior to this announcement, the last time a woman appeared was Martha Washington, almost 120 years ago, as I said. Moreover, the Secretary confirmed that the new note would incorporate a raised tactile feature to provide meaningful access to United States currency for blind individuals as well.
Oh, God, yes.
The Secretary of Treasury has sole design authority for United States currency, and historically, currency design's been an insider activity with the Secretary and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. However, with this redesign, the Secretary invited the American public to engage in a conversation to help guide the process. Not only was Treasury's engagement monumental in scope, the response from the American people was as well. The public not only told us which women they'd like to see on the note, and we had over 275 suggestions, but they also shared interesting symbols and recommendations for how best to talk about and show our democracy. And just as an aside, one of the most beautifully designed notes that we saw out there featured Beyonce. Somebody put a lot of time and energy to designing a note. Unfortunately, the one requirement that she did not meet, and there's only one to be featured on the United States currency, is you have to be dead. So we couldn't put her on there. So the Treasury Department held public forums, roundtables, open houses, met with historians from academia, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We had millions, literally, of interactions with the public in making this selection. The Secretary's announcement garnered interest from the Hill as well. There were meetings and phone calls, and there was even legislation proposed related to the redesign of the currency. In response to this huge outpouring of ideas that came from the public, the Secretary decided we needed to think big. And he suggested changing not just one note, but 3 notes. So we started looking at the $5 note, the $10 note, and the $20 note. A wide range of options were considered and discussed based on the feedback we received. I would like to make a note that the Secretary made it very clear in making his selections, as the person who has the authority to choose, that this was not a popularity or a beauty contest. He was going to look for people that he thought represented and made meaningful contributions to this great country of ours. After a year of receiving public feedback, on April 20th, 2016, Secretary Liu announced the design concepts for the next family of notes, and that Harriet Tubman was going to grace the face of the $20 note. Mrs. Tubman believed in the promise of America. Her vision was inclusionary. She extended herself well beyond her own family to all people. She was even a suffragist to make sure that women could get the right to vote. Mrs. Tubman's ingenuity and shrewdness, her struggle through slavery, the Underground Railroad, her military service, and the hope that she represented supported her selection as representative of the American spirit of democracy. The Secretary added that designs of the $5 and $10 notes would also feature women that impacted our democracy. Since the announcement, we've been working with the Secretary to prepare countless designs, concepts for the 3 notes. Our designers have been researching the life of Mrs. Tubman and sketching images. Just last month, they were at the Tubman House in Auburn, New York, and met with representatives from the AME Zion Church. This church was designated by Mrs. Tubman as the keeper of her legacy. Almost all the images and photographs that we've seen of Mrs. Tubman are from her later years in life. The final image for us is a work in progress still, and our designers are continuing to collaborate and refine a portrait concept to capture Mrs. Tubman's essence that projects her inner strength, dignity, and steadfastness. When redesigning our currency, the global acceptance of our currency is paramount, and redesign is driven primarily by security. Our currency generates a profit of over $50 billion a year for the United States government, so we have to keep security in the forefront of what we do. Final design concepts will be unveiled in 2020, and we're continuing to work on security features to protect that note. Our primary focus at this time is public features that are new and innovative and exclusive to United States currency. Once selected, these features, design concepts, and the tactile features for the next series of notes will go through refinement and testing. This is not a quick or easy process, so that's why we're targeting 2020 for the unveiling of the design concepts. So the question that everyone asks me is, who really chose Harriet Tubman? And the other people that went on the 5 and 10. And the answer is, I don't know. I can tell you who told me it was going to be Harriet Tubman, and that is Secretary Liu. But I will tell you that Secretary Liu, like myself, works for President Obama.
Okay.
Okay. So I know before any final selection was made, there were certain meetings that were held that I was not a part of in making that selection. So I think we're all going to have to wait until their memoirs are written to find out who really made that selection. But this is a very exciting time for us at BEP. It's not often that we redesign our currency, and this time we really get to make a significant contribution to the history of this country. In the words of Harriet Tubman, every great dream begins with a dreamer. And there were many dreamers that have pushed for this for a very long time. I am honored to have worked with some of these dreamers to make this a reality, and now have the challenge of bringing that note to the American public. I feel blessed to be leading BEP, and I can't wait to show you all and the world what a message we're sending. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Oliar, and I think all of us have learned a little bit now about the printing possibilities of this $20 bill, and all of us look forward to the unveiling of the $20 bill, and I think all of us look forward to carrying it in our wallet. A question? I believe 2020 was the year?
2020 will be the unveiling of the designs. The issuing authority is the Federal Reserve, and they will determine when it enters circulation.
One other question?
At this point in time, yes, the Secretary's guidance is that we're going to preserve Andrew Jackson in some way on the back of the $20 note. What that means, the designers are still working on.
One more question, then we're going to have to move forward. One more.
I have one, and so it's two more.
Okay.
Okay.
Definitely two more.
Okay, I want to know what happened to Hamilton, because it was a lot of discussion, and of course, it was a lot of concern, and then when they did the play in New York, he was off the table. So can you explain that? You know, because I think we should keep Hamilton, because he did a lot as far as setting up our financial system.
Actually, I totally agree with you, and so did the Secretary of the Treasury, Jacob Lew. He said that he wasn't going to be the Secretary of Treasury that took the first Secretary of Treasury off the face of the $10 note. The publicity that came with Hamilton obviously generated a lot of positive public buzz for Alexander Hamilton. And one of the interesting things as you talk about the memorials that exist to Harriet Tubman and others, there's no memorial to Alexander Hamilton in Washington, and I was talking to a historian about that, and he said the memorial to Alexander Hamilton is the city of Washington, because we would have never survived without that first Secretary of Treasury. He financed this country and got us on a solid footing. So he's not going anywhere.
We had that one question from one of our students. Yes, sir. Could you stand? I can't hear you.
He asked if there's ever going to be another African American on United States currency, and actually there are going to be 2 additional African Americans on United States currency, and they're going to be featured on the back of the $5 note, which has the Lincoln Memorial on it, and there will be 2 very significant contributors to our democracy. First, Dr. Martin Luther King is going to be featured. And what the Secretary wanted to do was he wanted to take the buildings that were on the back and bring them to life. And of course, the I Have a Dream speech came from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, which is featured on the back of the 5. And one other person is Marian Anderson. Woo! And for those of you who are thinking, well, who is Marian Anderson? Because I'll be honest, that was what I was thinking when I was told that this was a learning experience for many of us. Marian Anderson was a singer who came to Washington, D.C., and they wouldn't let her sing in DAR Hall. And Eleanor Roosevelt made arrangements for her to sing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial as well, and send a message to the country that we're all free and equal.
All right, we got to hear from.
Was there some consideration on Mary McLeod through Facebook that there was some petition going around for Mary McLeod? Do you have any information?
Yeah, we received petitions on a number of different folks. Juliet Lowe from the Girl Scouts. It was a very interesting campaign, and a lot of people came from a lot of different directions. We had, as I mentioned, 275 different women that were publicly suggested to us, whether through emails, Facebook, Twitter. And for me, one of the greatest things of the whole campaign process, and what it highlighted for me was a shortcoming in our education process, is of those 275 people, I probably had only ever learned about 50 of them. And the treasurer found out that for folks who are in high school and are required to take their SATs or ACT exams, there's only one woman that they need to know about for the exams.
One last question. Who is the other woman that was on the coin that will be on the test and the kids don't know her name? No, we had another woman on the coin. Who was that woman?
Sacagawea was also on the coin.
And one other?
Susan B. Anthony
Okay,
was $1.
yes. And why did that, I mean, we don't use that coin anymore.
They're still made, but they don't circulate. People prefer the product of paper currency. It's easier to carry.
Yes.
Well,
Yes. Yes, that's right. I lost some money that way too.
If anybody, if you didn't hear that, she was stating that because the Susan B. Anthony coin was often mistaken for a quarter rather than $1, which is why a lot of people chose to not use that coin. But we want to thank Mr. Eliari. Obviously, you've generated a lot of discussion, and we appreciate that. And as we ask our current panel to transition down, we'd like to present you with a gift from Congresswoman Brown, and as you transition down, we're going to call her up to bring forth her remarks. And we thank you all, and obviously, audience, we thank you for this first panel. We have our second set of panels. If you all will go ahead and come on up.
Come down sometime. We'd be happy to show you what we've got.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Please do. The mint does, they're our system.
All right, thank you.
While she's getting positioned, we want to say this lady that's coming up right now, we owe her a multitude of thanks. For these 15 years that we have been presenting this particular forum, she has championed the cause for us, and we owe her, as she comes to the podium, a standing ovation. So let's get on our feet and stand for Ms. Corrine Brown, Congresswoman, 5th District of Florida.
Thank you. God is good. All the time. Before you take your seat, because I may get excited while I make my remarks, you all can take your seats. I want to give you this as a token of appreciation for doing this workshop for 15 years. Let's give her a hand. Because the nice thing is, the only thing I have to do is show up. She does all the work. That's what I like in a staff. We take all of the credit. except when they do something wrong. Okay, before I begin, first of all, my sorority is here, Sigma Gamma Rho. Would you all still stand, please? Let's give them a hand. In addition to that, elected officials, will you stand? I knew I saw one come in. Introduce yourself. She always comes. And excuse me, would you introduce yourself? She's a Florida A&M graduate. So, I have my team here from Orlando that's come area NY, from Eatonville, who's the oldest African-American town in the United States of America. Stand up. You'll see these kids when they take the test. Say a word while you're standing. Wait a minute, do we have a mic? Come up. She has this low voice, and you need to hear what she has to say. She's from Eatonville, Florida. How many of you young people know about Eatonville? Okay.
That means...
And not only that, it's a restaurant in D.C. named Eatonville, too. And the food is very good. Well, close it.
That means that you've heard of Zora Neale Hurston, the writer, the author, the anthropologist. For 28 years, we have celebrated the annual Zora Neale Hurston Festival of the Arts and Humanities. And this January 21 through 29, we will be celebrating historic Eatonville at year 130 because the town will be celebrating its anniversary. I also want to acknowledge a person here that belongs to both of us, Congresswoman Brown, and that is board member Reginald McGill from the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community. He serves as the treasurer, the man who oversees the cash.
Reggie, stand up. Reggie is the assistant to the... So you can say hello.
Hello, everybody. The campaign is not being a member of the guidance staff, which I'm proud to be. I got my stuff from Congresswoman Brown. When she was elected, I saw what and I'm still working.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say I'm really, really excited about what we've done over these last 15 years and truly excited about this coins, what we're going to do as far as, have you all seen some of the pictures of maybe what the currency going to look like? We have some flyers out there. And so when we came out that day around the Capitol Hill, they were saying, well, how come she wasn't smiling? Well, as far as I'm concerned, you don't smile when things are not funny. And so all of the pictures are serious looking pictures of her, and she was doing some serious work. And so I'm so excited about her and her being on this. Yeah, and so we have copies of the different projections of what it will look like. Well, the day it came out, one of the candidates for the presidency of the United States says, well, I think she deserved to be on the dollar bill, but maybe the $2 bill. But of course, I'm with her, and my person would never say something like that. And we know that there was a $2 bill at one time. It didn't work. But $20, nobody's going to throw it away. And the question was about slavery and the title, free or not to be free. So is the question. And someone mentioned young people about slavery. And someone on the talk show said, well, at least they had free housing. Who was that? Bill O'Reilly. Pull it up. Free housing. So, I mean, you know, even though that sounds absurd, I have a picture of me and the president and me getting off the plane with the president. Well, I've asked several young people, who is that? And they looked at the picture and they said, well, that's you. And then I said, well, who is this other person? And they looked at it and they said, well, that's Trump. Now, it was President Barack Obama. And I looked at the parents and I said, did you hear? Now, this is two separate kids. Two separate kids they said, they looked at me and they were just smiling. I said, did you hear what they said? They don't know who the president of the United States of America is. Now, that's our responsibility. That's the parents' responsibility, and that's not cute. That's not cute. And these kids was 7 to 10. So this is what they see on TV. And they just see it and they just think, well, listen, when I was elected in 1992, it was President Bill Clinton. It was President George Bush. And it was Barack Obama. Now it is President Barack Obama. President Barack Obama. And I can tell you that the hand he was dealt with, you know, I play cards. I'm pretty good at it. Used to be when I was at FAMU anyway. But the point is, you dealt the president a bad hand, and he turned it around. He turned this country around. I know it's hard for us to give him the credit. And he was talking the other day on television, and he said they were talking about all the things he's done. And you know, at one point, all you could hear was the gas prices, the gas prices. Well, now they're around $2. They said that, you know, that's President Barack Obama too, lower gas prices. And so we really have some great stories to tell. But if you don't tell your story, it will not be told. I have had the honor to serve 23 years in the United States Congress, and I travel all over the world with transportation. And I got to tell you, I went to Normandy. Now, who do you think, young people, runs the Normandy Cemetery in Normandy? Who do you think operated? Who do you think operate? Because that's United States of America property. It's the National Park Service. All over the world, in Normandy, that is America land, where we have all of those soldiers that went over there that fought for this country and fought for the world. They're buried there, and it's the United States of America property. So now you know. We are all over the world. It's the National Park Service. So let's give them a hand. Now, one other place I want to talk about. In Jacksonville, Florida, and in St. Augustine, we got two park services there. The one in Jacksonville is outside of Amelia Island or American Beach. And it is the Kingsley Plantation. It's the only plantation in the country that a black woman ran the plantation married to the owner. Now you pull that up. You pull that up. A black woman ran the plantation. So we have a lot of history, but I have found out if you don't tell your history, it will not be told. And if you don't explain to young people, I mean, how did you get Trump? Me getting off the plane with him. So the point of the matter is, every kid, when I talk to a 2-year-old, need to know that the President of the United States is who? President. And I don't want to talk about all of the great things he's done, but I just want to talk about one, healthcare. Now, you know, it just amazed me that people actually got on motorcycles and came up to Washington and told me not to vote for it. I said, if you had gotten in an accident coming up, who you think gonna pay for it? I mean, really, what we don't want, listen, we don't want Obamacare, but you want Medicaid. It's the same thing, Medicare, same thing. So the point of the matter, every president since Theodore Roosevelt have tried to get health care, every single one. And President Barack Obama did not vote for it. I did. He just signed it into law. And we made sure that it included information in there that every kid can stay on their family plan to 26. Now, I was speaking at the University of Florida, and I asked them a question. I said, how many people can stay on their family plan that's in this audience? Every hand went up. I said, perhaps they didn't understand the question. So I asked them again. Every hand went up. That is a blessing that you have insurance coverage. But one of the things we made sure of, and I was involved in it, that you didn't have to be in school, that you didn't have to be working, because a lot of you are home on your parents' sofa trying to figure it out, and you really need insurance. So you're included. In addition to that, the donut hole. And a lot of the elderly people know what that is, that when you're doing your prescriptions at a certain point, you got to pay, and then the government kick back in. We're doing away with that so that you will not have to pay co-payments. And then I hear this complaint in Florida about Zika and other things. We are sending back in Florida over $50 billion for health care. Now, some other states are doing it, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, $50 billion though in Florida. And we are taxing Floridians. How many Floridians in this room? Okay. Well, we are taxing you. And you are saying, we don't want it. We want to send this money to Maryland. How many people are in Maryland? See, they're getting your money. And in fact, my colleagues say to me, Corrine, do y'all have any more money you want to send to us? We are ready. They say that's right. Because we got $4 billion for high-speed train that was going to go from Orlando to Tampa. The governor sent it back. 28 states got our money, including Salt Lake City, Utah. And I went there, and I drove the train all up in the mountains. I drove it. They let me drive the train so that you could see how our money is going other places. So it is so important that when you go to vote, that you don't just walk in there and vote for her, like I'm going to do, and then vote and walk out. A lot of times they say, well, Congresswoman, I voted for you. And I said, but what about the rest of the team? It takes the whole team. We got state attorneys, we got judges, We got initiatives. It takes the whole team. I say it works well when the local, state, and federal work together. Yes. You see this delegate, when we send the money from Washington to the state of Maryland, they make sure that they don't send it back and that somebody else getting their money. We're not doing that in Florida. So it's very important that we educate people on the importance of voting. Now, I'm just very disappointed that I just lost my election. I know. However, let me just say something. We had a 29% turnout. Now, everybody turned out, we got a good vote. But if you don't have the kind of turnout that you need, then listen, people were saying, oh, they were so hurt, they were so disappointed, me too. But I can tell you it could be worse. In November, the day after the election, this whole country could be in reverse. And so it's very important. I'm not telling you, like they say in church, how to vote. You smart enough to figure it out. But you need to go out and vote. And everybody needs to do their part. And you don't need to have somebody home in your house that's not voting. And each one of us need to be a soldier in this army. Because all of the gains that we made is on the line. I don't know what part you don't get. They talking about what is it? We're going to take America back to when it was great? Are we talking about when we had slavery? What part of history was great that you wasn't the free labor? Free housing this is what Bill O'Reilly said, free housing. So there is so much on the line, and everybody have to be a soldier in this army. And even young people can play a part to make sure that their grandmothers are registered and they can vote, that everybody in the house vote, because it matters. Let me just tell you, we decide when you're born you get a birth certificate, and when you die you're going to get a death certificate. And that dash in between is what you've done to make this a better place. Now, it's all on the line. We're at a crossroad of whether we're going to go forward or whether we're going to go back. And how many people in this room don't understand what I'm talking about? How many people in this room not registered? Mm-hmm. Now, none of you over there are registered. You're not 18? Okay. Okay, just a few. But so most of you all are not registered. But how many know people that are not registered and you can make sure they get registered and vote? Raise your hand. I'm trying to enlist you in this army here. All right. So I've got to tell you, this has been a very challenging time for me. And I was on the Tom Joyner show this morning. And so you can pull it up. That's my man, Tom Joyner. And you can pull up the talk this morning. But he mentioned that when I'm going through my challenge, that I had a real difficult time finding an attorney. And, they talked about it. Well, she didn't have 3 or 4. Yes, 3 or 4 that I interviewed and talked to, because it's a very serious relationship finding an attorney. And everybody said, well, I'm praying for you. And yes. Well, the Lord stepped in. And he sent me this attorney. And I want you to meet him. And the day before I was supposed to go back to court and tell him who my attorney was, this young lady called me, who's an attorney. She said, I just want you to talk to him. I said, well, okay, I'll give him a call. So I called him, and I talked to him for 15 minutes. And I knew the Lord had sent me this young man. Now, he's a Hampton graduate.
The Army sent him to Duke for a law degree. He was a JAG officer. He served 4 years at Florida A&M Law School. He traveled around the country teaching young lawyers how to present themselves in court. And so I am so excited about bringing up this role model for these young people so you can see that you can also, and let me just tell you all some breaking news. I never thought I was going to have a black attorney. You know, if you have a cancer or if you need an attorney, you just want the best. The Lord sent me the best, and he just happened to be black. Come on up.
All right, it's hard to follow that act. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Smith, and I'm an attorney. I practice down in Orlando. And let me just say this to the young people out here today. One of the most important and revolutionary acts that you can do is to educate yourself. We just had a presentation where we talked about a hero in American history, Harriet Tubman, someone who was instrumental in the Underground Railroad. And the reason that she was such a hero was because she was a fierce fighter for justice. She understood the basic principles of liberation. And that first principle is that you're not truly free unless you're free in the mind. If you know anything about slavery, you'll know that perhaps the most savage beating that you could ever get was the beating you would get if the slave master found out that you were reading and you were trying to educate yourself. Sometimes even more severe than the beating you might get if you tried to escape. And why is that? And that's because you can never truly be enslaved if you're educated, if you know your history, and if you understand the myriad ways in which the oppressor tries to keep us from being fully free human beings. And there are a number of ways that they do it. First and foremost, by trying to keep us from having representations of our historical heroes on currency, or in history books, or in television, or in movies. Another way that they try to do it is they try to separate us by class, by gender, by sexual orientation. They want us to fight over things that are irrelevant instead of recognizing our common humanity. The one great thing about the struggle for racial justice in this country is that it's a struggle that's always been engaged in by people of all races, black and white, young and old, male and female. In that Underground Railroad, a number of those homes were owned by whites. And if you know anything about your history with regard to the civil rights struggle, you need to remember, for example, just three names: Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman. Three young men, black, white, and Jewish, who ended up being killed. Why? Because they all shared a common dream, making the promise of democracy real for everyone. And so the Congresswoman is right. We stand at a crossroads today, and that crossroads is, are we going to finally do something about what is perhaps the final plantation in the United States, and that's the criminal justice system. As a defense attorney, every day I go into courts, primarily federal courts, where I see mostly white judges, white prosecutors, and sadly, black defendants. It used to be primarily they were young black men, but increasingly I'm seeing young black women. Children, in fact, as young as 15, 16, 17 years old. And don't for a second think that it couldn't be you. What I want to tell you young people is that we tend to think sometimes, well, the people who get in trouble are the people who are on the wrong side of town. That's not going to happen to me. I live in a good neighborhood. But the reality is, you could be that person stopped by a police officer. And if you stand up for your rights, that police officer could manufacture evidence, trump up a statement, and suddenly you find yourself with that arrest, that indictment, or that conviction. Right now in our system daily, We are prosecuting young people of color, and we're giving them convictions that last for a lifetime. And beyond the imprisonment, beyond the fines, beyond all the terrible things that can happen to you if you get caught up in the criminal justice system, perhaps the most important stigma that's attached to you is that you end up losing your right to vote. You end up losing your right to select your leaders. You end up losing your right to affect democracy. The goal of racism and slavery has always been to keep us as that 3/5 of a person. And when they couldn't do it anymore through the Constitution or through statutes, they decided to do it in the courts. It used to be the slave master who would use the whip to keep us in line. Now it's the prosecutor who uses the grand jury and the indictment and the prison to keep us in line. We are now in this country publicly trading stock for prisons.
That's right.
Prisons have become a profit. And when we have leaders like Congresswoman Brown who stand up for us, who fight for justice, who do things like she's done here for the 15 years, educating people, what do? In the middle of a re-election, they bring an indictment designed solely for one purpose, to keep her from being re-elected and to strike fear into you. Because if you're a young person or if you're a constituent, you're probably thinking to yourself, if she could be indicted, if she could be arrested, if she could be convicted, then what could happen to me? It's a principle as old as slavery itself. The slave master would strike against the strongest slave because the belief was, if I can show the others that this one has to bow down to me, the rest of them will bow down. I want all of you to take a look at that picture that the Congresswoman held up, that picture of Harriet Tubman who's on that $20 bill. And as you can see, she's not smiling. She has a very fierce, determined look on her face. And as I've gotten the chance to know the Congresswoman over the past week or so, I've seen that look more than once. And I'm sure all of you have. But behind that tough exterior, there's a woman with a heart of gold. Let me tell you that the first day that I met her when we were walking around town, we were stopped probably every 10 or 15 seconds by constituents of all races, all ages, all genders, said, "Thank you for what you've done for me." And each one had a personal story to tell about how she made a call to help out a relative or a call to help improve their lives. And this is sadly what the system does. When you have someone who's good and progressive, if you go back, what does the system try to do? They try to strike against the individual, and they claim they're doing it in the interest of the law, but in reality, it's nothing more than a legalized lynching. So what I want to say to you now is this. It's time for us to stand up for Congresswoman Brown. She's delivered for her constituents. For almost 35 years, the state and local and the federal level. And it's time for all of you, if you can, to stand up, go to her website, and contribute any way that you can. Now, it is true that she did lose her re-election effort, but let me tell you one thing. I have faith that we're going to fight this case. The reason that I believe it's a privilege to represent her is because we are going to take this case to trial and we're going to win. And when we do, I look forward to coming back here and talking about how we fought and how we won. So let me close just with this to the young kids out here today. There's been a lot in the news lately about symbolic protests, and certainly that's important and it has its place. Hashtagging, going on Twitter and taking a knee, those are all important things. But let me just tell you this. The most important and revolutionary act that you can engage in is to educate yourself, to organize, and to get involved, and to vote. Thank you.
We thank Mr. Smith, and certainly we appreciate our Congresswoman Corrine Brown. One question?
Absolutely. Yes, it absolutely has been, And what we're going to do is we're going to make certain that you can get that information. I can tell you that if you go to the Congresswoman's website, the information is there for how you can contribute. And if anyone is interested, please see me afterwards, and I'll make sure that I give you all the directions on how to go there and contribute. Thank you.
You got the envelopes.
Yes, we have envelopes available, and again, see me afterwards, and we'll certainly make sure that you can contribute.
We thank Mr. Smith for the questions and for the answers that he's provided for us. And certainly, again, we thank Congresswoman Corrine Brown for her work and her many years of service, which I'm sure will never stop. In our next 30 minutes, we have 3 exciting speakers that are going to come to you. We talked earlier when we began this session about how the first part of our program was going to be informational. The second part is going to be enlightening. And so we want to call forth for a brief message someone that is an exciting speaker. We were introduced to her very late as we were preparing this session, but as I began to read what she's doing, I thought it was very exciting. So she only wanted a few minutes to be able to talk to us and share just a little bit about what she's doing. Certainly she has definitely beat me in terms of walking and mileage. But we want to introduce to you Ms. Opal Lee, who has a brief message she wants to come to and share.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'll be over. Okay. Listen, why don't we just give her this one?
No, you're fine.
Well, we can't hear you though. So it won't come out. That one won't. This one will.
How about this? This is okay. I've got it.
Okay, you get here. This one. Come over.
We got one.
Okay, you got one.
Okay. I've been outside handing out these cards. I brought 5,000 from Fort Worth, and I don't plan to take them back home. And so I'm going to tell you about them. I'll be 90 next month, October the 7th. And it dawned on me that one of the passions I have, Juneteenth, isn't a national holiday, and we've been asking and doing all the things that you're supposed to do to make it a holiday, and it's not. And I decided if an old lady, 90 years old, started walking to Washington, D.C., that somebody would take notice. And so far, I've been about from Fort Worth, Texas to Rock Springs, Texas. I thought I could do 5 miles in the morning and 5 miles in the afternoon. I found out I can do 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. I try to do 1. So we started the 1st of September, and I've done about 54 miles in all. It's a symbolic walk. I ain't walking no 1,400 miles, y'all. But I do plan to get back up here. Now, I've got this little speech written out, so you got to listen. I'm sure you're thinking of why another holiday. I'm talking about Juneteenth. There are already 144 holidays on the books, and so I think the number 145 should be Juneteenth, because it's a unifying force. For over 150 years, we've celebrated freedom, such as it is. That General Order Number 3 granted slaves in Texas 2.5 years after everybody else knew about it. There were 250,000 slaves in Texas because the plantation owners had taken their slaves there with the idea of retrieving them after the war. That didn't happen. We started celebrating, and we've been celebrating ever since. Other ethnic groups have reason to celebrate with us, so that's why we see Juneteenth as a unifying force to be reckoned with. When we got the news that was posted on the door of Reedy Chapel AME Church, we started celebrating. That was in Galveston. And we've been celebrating all over these United States. You may know that 45 states have it as a state holiday. And in Texas, it's a paid holiday, just in case you didn't know. You are aware that none of us are free until all of us are free. And we ain't free yet, y'all. I'll repeat that. None of us are free until we are all free from hunger, health problems, miseducation, joblessness, homelessness, and a litany of other social ills and financial insecurities. Juneteenth needs to be and must be considered a unifying force. As a former third grade teacher, we taught with repetition, so I'll keep on repeating it over and over and over again, that Juneteenth can be a unifier. Heaven knows this country needs a unifier. Juneteenth Independence Day, Juneteenth Freedom Day, Juneteenth Emancipation Day. I could care less what it's called. However, the connotation of red soda water and watermelon must be changed dramatically, drastically. Does anybody remember in Texas when Al Edwards got the Juneteenth bill passed, what a hard time his colleagues were giving him, and when the bill passed, he served them all watermelon. That's when you're handed lemons, make lemonade. Juneteenth shouldn't be viewed as only an African-American holiday. Slaves didn't free themselves. It took God working on the hearts of others, like the abolitionists who were black and white, like the Quakers who risked their lives and their families' lives to call for equality and justice for the enslaved. They held conventions and lectures and lobbied Congress and helped those that were seeking the Underground Railroad. Juneteenth is about educating our youth and our community about available resources to make their lives better, better health care, financial and educational opportunities. The understanding that knowledge empowers the individual is what we want people to realize. With their new freedom, the freedman and the freed woman could plan their own lives, no matter how short they live. Surely the idea has merit that Juneteenth should become a national holiday. In my city, Juneteenth has various components. We have health fairs and financial fairs and exhibits and educational components, as well as the festival with the entertainment and the food. However, I envision the elementary school I attended as a child with 3 buildings, several acres of land could be an ideal location for a permanent Juneteenth theme park. You know, since this is a theme park, we have a theme park mentality in our nation. And it would house the achievements of blacks in Fort Worth and surrounding areas. If I could dream further, I would use celebrating freedom all summer long. June the 19th to July the 4th, because you have to remember we wasn't free on the 4th of July. And I need not quote you anything from Frederick Douglass. I've already told you about my walk, and I plead with you to not let me get on my arthritic knees begging you to make this a reality. Please assure me that my asking you for your support has not been in vain. Thank you.
Let's give her a big hand. Thank you so much. And did you hear that she was doing 2 miles in the morning and 2 miles in the evening? And I just wish I could do 1 mile a day. But the major thing, I think, you need to have a step forward. And the point is that when you're talking about Juneteenth, some places in this country haven't gotten the word yet. So, I mean, a lot of people don't know yet that they're free and can vote. You look at the South, when you have such a large number of African Americans in Georgia and Mississippi and Texas that's not voting, and Hispanics. So you need to, if you look at how we vote, then I don't know that we're ready for a holiday celebrating Juneteenth, but we can show that we're ready by stepping up and voting.
Yes, and these little cards right here.
We're going to pass them out at the end.
I just want to tell them what it's about. Otherwise, they take them and put them in their pockets.
Okay.
All right? If you go into your website and give us your signature, I need 100,000 signatures to take to Congress. They're not going to talk to me, and I need them by September the 27th. Go to the website. Help me with it.
Ms. Lee?
Yes, no comments, because Congress is missing in action, because we're getting ready to leave next week. And we won't be back until after November. But I do think we need to go online and sign those petitions and support her. Let's give her another hand. There used to be a Negro song that I like, a charge to keep God to glorify. You see that she's glorifying God through her work. Let's give her another hand.
As we move forward in this session, this particular person I met a few years ago was perhaps one of the most exciting people that I'd met, because we see her picture in history books everywhere, but we didn't realize this was the person that we were seeing. When you look at the March on Washington and see the representation of young people out there doing what they do at the March on Washington, you see this photo of this young lady holding up a pennant that speaks to exactly what that event was about. And now she's still a young lady, but she's carrying forth the efforts of activism. And that's what Congresswoman Brown has talked about. Let's do what we need to do. Let's vote. Let's get out there. Let's do what we need to do. Without going into a lot of depth, we're reading a bio. I just wanted to say she's the executive director of the Lee Levitt Foundation, co-founded with the late James Levitt Jr., who was the heart recipient of her eldest son. That's very important. I'd like to introduce to you Ms. Edith Lee Payne.
Thank you so much, Miss Addie and Congresswoman Brown. I just want to say it's an honor to, we have not yet been formally introduced, but I certainly know about you, know all about you. And you have been and will continue to be an inspiration to this country, certainly people in Florida, but to this country, and I'm with you. I've been following. I'm with you in your struggle. This is the photograph that Ms. Richburg was talking about, and amazingly, I didn't even know, first of all, that this picture had been taken August 28th, 1963, which also happened to be my 12th birthday. And as a child, you know, your mother says, this is what we're going to do, this is what you do. But I was very, very proud to be there because I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And in Detroit, as I heard Dr. King speak and saw different things on the news about what was happening in the South, I didn't have those experiences because in Detroit I lived in an integrated neighborhood and attended integrated schools and rode the bus with my mother because she didn't have a car, so we had to take public transportation. So we would just get on the bus and sit wherever we wanted to sit and go wherever we wanted to go and have hamburger deluxes at all the restaurants and lunch counters. So it was strange to me to know that people couldn't do these things, and we were in the same country. And later in life, I began to question the Pledge of Allegiance that I would say every day at school. It wasn't liberty and justice for all. There was just something wrong with that. I understood full well when I was there why I was there, and it was the second time actually I heard Dr. King speak. He had visited Detroit just a few months earlier in June and asked, there were about 100,000 people that attended a march there, and he asked that we join him and others in D.C. I don't think the date was selected then, and I'm saying in retrospect because I've certainly researched as much as I possibly could. But I remember in that first speech, or the speech that he did in June, he used that same refrain, "I have a dream." It was not the same speech. So those of us in Detroit always claim that as being the first. Actually, it was not. He even said it before that. But what I got from Dr. King's speech and his purpose as a child, being reared in church, I didn't view him as a speaker. I viewed him as a pastor, which is what he was. A lot of his messages, of course, reference scripture. So I was able to accept and understand what he said with a lot more conviction and challenge for me to want to do more and to do better. And it brought more light to the problems, to the issues and the differences that we faced. When I stood at that march 53 years ago with my mother and my Aunt Edith, whom I'm named after, I could not tell a person from Mississippi that looked like me from my mother, because we were all there together trying to make a difference, believing that we could make a difference. And it was an atmosphere of, I want to say, camaraderie, because there weren't just African Americans. Dr. King's message was not just for Negroes, which is what we were called then. It was for the entire country, and everyone was able to embrace what he wanted to see happen, the change that he wanted to see happen in this country, because as he said, July 4th, there was a debt still owed to us, and that debt is still owed to us. So I see on the agenda, is it a right or is it a fight? It's actually both. It's a right that we have, that the Constitution has promised us, regardless to whether anyone wants to believe anyone is 3/5 of a person, 2/3, or anything else. It's what our Creator made us, and He didn't make us any portion or fraction thereof. We're a whole individual, and it's what we believe in ourselves, of ourselves, and know what we can do as individuals. And again, it doesn't matter what color you are. It just matters who you are, and that you know who you are. And depending on your faith, it's even more important to know whose you are. And when you know that, and that was kind of what Dr. King was about, his strength and what he conveyed to us came from a higher authority. And he was fearless in doing so, as were the people that were there. The difference being, we know about Black Lives Matter. I still demonstrate. I'm a civil rights activist. I'm a little reluctant to be in a crowd and chant, "No justice, no peace," because it stirs up a negative emotion, because it's a negative, we're there for a bad reason. It's not anything good. Compared to when voices in unison recited together during a march or a demonstration, it was a hymn. It was something that said to everyone that was there and to the people that didn't want them there, that we have the strength, we have this power, we have this faith, we have this belief, and no matter what you say or what you do to us, we're not afraid. And they were willing to make the sacrifice, even if it was their life. And we know many soldiers have gone on because they wanted to make things better. That we don't see today. It's not continued in the struggle or in the process. In Michigan, where I live now, in Detroit, it's the only state in the union that doesn't have democracy. I'm sure all of you are aware of the Flint water crisis and the fact that an emergency manager flipped the switch. Well, that emergency manager was there and appointed because the
Governor?
The Republican-led House and Senate and Republican governor believed that municipalities and school districts of color really can't manage. And so they would withhold money that we were supposed to get and then say, well, you're financially insolvent, so you need an emergency manager. Well, flipping the switch in Flint from Detroit's water source, which was healthy, they obviously knew better. And I have to get this out because you don't hear this on the news. General Motors has a plant in Flint. They stopped using the water because it was destroying their cars. They went back to Detroit's water. And the government, Michigan's government, knew that. So obviously, if it destroyed a car, the inside of a car, certainly you don't continue to give it to people. So that's a fight that we're in right now, is trying to restore the constitutionality of a law that usurps the power of the people that we elect. I'd rather not have the right to vote if I can vote, and then you can appoint somebody that has more power than my mayor, my city council, and my school board. And that's what it is right now. I'm going to end with this banner that I brought with me, which is the banner that's in that picture. And thanks to my mother, that, you know how mothers, we just keep everything that our children do. Well, my mother kept it. She passed away 23 years ago, and I inherited it, and I've been keeping it. But I will be passing it off to the Smithsonian on Saturday, and it will be with them. So having a little separation anxiety here. It's like my child, and very much a part of me, but I wanted you to see it, and I so appreciate this opportunity to share a few things with you.
Before you take your seat, I have a question, and maybe someone else have a question. Can we take a question? Because the point is, this is an example of what happens when you do not vote. Now, Michigan didn't vote. I mean, the governor, the legislature, they changed it. It didn't just change, so that they said that and they held the money, as you said. So that is the problem. You know, we have proven as a people that we can elect people, but we got to make them accountable. And it's unacceptable. We are hoping that we will pass legislation before we leave here next Thursday that will give you all the money that you all need for the water resources.
But that's the whole team. When you go in there and you just vote for the president and you just vote for the governor and the state reps, they are the ones that make these decisions. And so, the governor just signed it one way or the other, but it's your state reps. And that is what happened when you do not vote. There is no reason why Michigan should be in this position with the number of, she's talking about Juneteenth, they haven't gotten the word that they can vote. Because clearly it's enough African Americans and people of goodwill in Michigan to make sure that this does not happen. Do you know who is a famous movie producer from Flint, Michigan? Michael Moore. Michael Moore. I know because he did a movie and I was in there. Remember that? Remember the 2000 election when we had the coup d'etat? When they took over the government and they said in my district 7, 8, 9, and 10 in Jacksonville, Florida, they didn't count the votes. 27,000 votes was thrown out, and they said that Bush carried Florida by 528. But in my district, that vote 90% plus Democrats, they would not count the vote, and in our community, we had old machines. So know that we still in this fight. And some of us haven't gotten the word that we can vote. All right. Thank you.
We're going to take one question.
Okay.
One question here.
Yes, you can stand just as long as we can hear you. Come on.
So you talked about the significance of the faith in the civil rights movement and compared it to the protest of today and the significance of Martin Luther King being a faith leader. What would you say a leader of today in terms of the protests we have now, what would you say ideally they would look like?
Look like, you mean act.
I would say that it has to be a leader that certainly identifies with what's going on. That's the focus first, not them, the issue, not interviews, the issue. That they believe that they can galvanize other support, because there were other leaders other than Dr. King that shared his passion, and that it be kept in a respectable way, because you have an objective. You want people to change things. You want people to listen. And as soon as you start this combative chant, everything goes out the window, because no one wants to hear that. Now, granted, 53 years ago, people were dressed professionally, shirts, ties, men, ladies, and people don't want to do that now. But it does make a difference. Your appearance always makes a difference. So I would say that all you need to do is look back, if it worked then, and then with 250,000 people on the mall without a cell phone, Snapchat, Facebook, all this other stuff, imagine with all these things that are going on right now today, right now, if you used your everything, and I know older people do Facebook, because my grandchildren don't do it anymore, because they said we took it away. But if you use those avenues and say, I don't like the fact that law enforcement is stopping me or being unfair to me. I've been pulled over by the police 3 times. And it was only because I'm black. And I know that, because I did nothing wrong. But I knew how to conduct myself and present myself and not be, ready to say, now look, what you stopped me for? It wasn't about that. It was, can I help you, officer? What can I do for you today?
Well,
so you have to change. You have to change. Whatever worked then, adopt some of those things and make it work for what you're fighting for.
Let me add something, because maybe I spoke too quickly. The point of the matter is, you made a good point. I probably would not have been able to march with Dr. King. I probably would have been over there with, what's the other person, Rat Brown or somebody? Because that's, you know, and Martin Luther King Jr. is my friend, and I had him in Jacksonville recently, and so I said, let's march from my campaign headquarters to the voting place. Well, it was hot outside, so we did a caravan. But your question was, what should a leader look like? I don't know whether that is the right question, but what should that person act like? Because, listen, if the police, I don't want the police stopping young people for no reason. I don't want them targeting young black people for no reason, because it's a confrontation. So the point is, we need to make sure that it's training with the police department. It's a responsibility there also. The training to make sure that they're not targeting young black males and females because they're in a certain car. And so the point is, I have worked to make sure. I remember once one stopped me, and you know, he said I was speeding, and I may have gotten a ticket. However, I said to myself, great training. He was so nice. We're concerned about your health. We want to make sure that you don't get in no accident, and you need to be, so you got the feeling that he'd been trained to make sure, and it was his tone. I said, goodness, what great training. So the point is, it's two ways. And we've got to make sure, you know, that they sell in that Texas case. I understand today, they sell in the Texas case, the family is going to get $2 million, but that doesn't bring the young person back. And so they're going to make sure that they change how they operate in the prison system. They're going to make sure that they have trained people there inside the prison so that, you know, the person can get the counseling. So it's an education on both sides. It's education on both sides. Yes, I do not want to see young people walking down the street with I don't want to see their underclothes this dirty. Absolutely. But my staff have told me, stop pulling over, asking them to pull up their pants. You're going to get in trouble. But the point is, they need to learn that before they leave home. There is a responsibility at home. Just like the young man that didn't know who President Barack Obama, it's not the school, it's not the church, it's home. And so we all have responsibility. But we got to bring up this young person. But what was your question?
I guess my question was, is faith as important today? Is it important to have a faith leader?
It's more.
Oh, yes.
It's more important today because if you look around, you don't see as many people in the churches as you used to see 53, 4. You don't see them. And when you lose that, see, that's your connection. That's what gives you the strength and the courage to do what you need to do when you don't have it anywhere else. They had that. They knew they had that. And if it meant going down, it was okay. See, I'm not afraid to die because I have that faith. I'm not a reverend, but I'm not afraid to die because I have convictions and I know what you have to do in order, if it's going to change, if I have to stand here. The police officers in my city won't even arrest me. I'm demonstrating, like, we can't arrest you. I'm like, yes, you can. Please arrest me. I'm making a point here. But they want to respect me, respect the grade. Forget that. This needs to happen. And it has a lot to do with it. You have no idea how much strength and courage you get from the source that you believe in.
We want to thank you for the question and for the comments and everything that's come subsequent to that. We owe this next speaker a lot of respect because she's waited to the end of the session. We had done this in chronological order and using our speakers as they brought forth their platforms. We thought that we would close out this particular session by having a young person speak to the issues of young people. And so I want us to all give her your respect as she comes forward. all of us, because we waited this long for her to have an opportunity to speak. It may put us a little bit over 3:30, but that's okay. It'll still be there when you get there. We want to introduce our next speaker is in the 8th grade and currently attends Riverdale Baptist School. She is definitely a member of the Student Government Association, Stress Government, and she is an honor student. She is a very vital member of the Keamsha Youth Empowerment Association, and she is very much a part of Penn. And without further ado, I want to introduce Tayana Clowney.
I would like to thank the Honorable Corinne Brown and President Addie Richburg for giving me this opportunity to speak on this panel. I would also like to thank the panelists for their contributions to this discussion. Good afternoon. My name is Tayana Clowney. I am in the 8th grade and I attend Riverdale Baptist School. I am currently a part of Keamsha Youth Empowerment Steering Committee. Keamsha means that which awakens me in Swahili. We use history to help to teach us to abstain from premarital sex, drugs, violence, and prejudice. This organization partners with the National Alliance of Faith and Justice, which is the founder of Penn Youth Movement. Penn stands for penitentiary, and pencil stands for education. We learn not to give up our seats in the classroom to board a bus to prison or jail. At 13, I have a lot of things I'm thinking about, but trust me, one of them are not the concepts of free or not to be. At 13, I usually think about what outfit I wear tomorrow, what hairstyle I wear next, what movies I would like to go see, and the list goes on. But since you asked, something that came to my mind was, what is the true meaning of freedom? Did you know you can be incarcerated and still be free? Well, this is true because freedom is not only a place, but it's also a state of mind. When I was 4, my mother became incarcerated. I was very hurt. I was so hurt and upset that she left and I didn't understand why. When I was around 5, I developed hatred towards police officers. When I went to see my mom, I held on to her with all my strength, and that they had to call 2 correctional officers to pull me off of her. I would cry and cry for 4 whole hours. At that time, I lived with my grandmother and grandfather in Baltimore, and they raised me. My father was incarcerated also, but I never knew him until I was 11. One day when I was 7 years old, my mother and grandmother made 2 excellent decisions that affected my life in an outstanding way. First, they set up for me to see a counselor to talk about my situation. The counselor encouraged me through the ups and downs of my life. I must stay positive. My way to stay positive was remembering I am a child of God. Second, they decided to let me live with my aunt and uncle for a better education and more opportunities. I call them Mom and Dad because I love them and I'm grateful for the life they provided for me. I had to continue thinking positive. If I didn't, I would have let my freedom go past me. I would have begun to think negative thoughts. Enslaved means your freedom is taken away from you by force. A slave is someone who willingly gives up their freedom to someone or something. For example, our ancestors were enslaved because they didn't have a choice. Some people are enslaved to smoking, drinking, and even their phones. When I was in the 6th grade, I had a lot of friends, or so-called friends. One of my friends invited me to a birthday party at her house in my community. I thought it was going to be fun because that is what you always think when you go to parties, but it ended up not fun at all. One of my friends asked, "Did we have a golf course?" I replied, "We sure do." Another friend suggested, "Let's go steal 5 golf carts and drive them." Once she said that, my eyes got big in shock. Everyone agreed with stealing the golf carts except for the birthday girl's cousin and me. We tried to convince them not to do it, but they didn't listen to us. So we both walked back home, and we saw one of our friends' brothers. He asked, where are the other girls you guys were with?" I replied, "They went somewhere we didn't want to go." He said, "I'll just track them on my phone." As he said that, they were walking back, and I said, "There they are." I went back home because I didn't want to be a part of the drama. When I went back to school the next day, all the girls said they were not my friend because they said I told my parents and my parents told their parents. They bullied me for something I didn't do. They lied on my parents and me. They pushed me, tripped me, and called me names. This bullying situation went on for several months until the end of the school year when everyone apologized and said I was right for trying to stop them from stealing the golf carts. But I knew I was free, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. So I went to school every day, said hi to them, and was respectful and nice to them. But if I didn't have gone to school, I would have never learned how to handle this bullying situation. Although my life may seem to be a tragedy to some, I must say I am free. Not free because I'm absent to the physical chains our ancestors had to endure, but free in my mind. Free to understand I am a child of God. Free to believe I can achieve anything I put my mind to. Free to live my life with a purpose. Free to make a difference in this world. And free to be great by choice. If Harriet Tubman could assist 300 of our enslaved ancestors to freedom using the Underground Railroad in the 1800s because of her state of mind, surely in the 21st century I can live in a constant state of freedom in my mind, soul, and body. One of the greatest gifts God has given to mankind is freedom of choice. Regardless of my circumstances, I choose each day to be free. I encourage you all to choose this day to be free. Thank you.
Give her another hand. This is absolutely wonderful.
I want her autograph.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was a stunning way to come to the close of this session, and we're going to let the closing remarks be done by our own Congresswoman Corrine Brown. Thank you so much, Tayana. Goodness, yes. Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, go ahead. You want to make an announcement? Give them the mic.
Thank you, Congresswoman Brown, Ms. Richburg, and to all of you present. My name is Ed Hines. I'm related to the Quander family, the oldest documented African-American family in America. Nellie Quander was first Supreme Baptist of Alpha Kappa Alpha at Howard University in 1912. Her sister, Susie Quander, was secretary to Carter G. Woodson, the father of African-American history. 1 week after the opening of the Museum of African-American History and Culture on the Mall, there will be an exhibit opening at Mount Vernon called Lives Bound Together, Slavery at George Washington's Mount Vernon. It will also correlate with the same day of the annual Slave Memorial Commemoration Ceremony. So I will be standing here for those of you that are interested, and I can show you how you can be invited. And I'd like to invite all of you as my guests. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you. Let's give all of the panelists a big hand. And let's have that young lady stand up one more time. Wow. You know, it's a lot of hope for the future for our young people. Now, in closing, I had decided maybe who I wanted to take over this brain trust. But I have been thinking about it, and I think I'm going to let the Black Caucus member have a contest, and let's see which one of them can take it to the next level. And so I will be contacting them and letting them know that this is such a wonderful brain trust, and we need someone that can take it to the next level. And I had thought, well, this person would be good, but I'm going to let them compete for who's going to take over. Let's give this blank brain trust a big hand. Okay, so in closing, I really do believe when you're born, you get a what? Birth certificate. And when you die, you're going to get what? A death certificate. And that dash in between is what you've done to make this a better place. Thank you so much.
Ms. Miller, Mr. Smith, you all could come up. Ms. Payne, everybody stay up. We're going to take pictures.